Hey, it's Saturday, and I'm Ted, sitting on the front porch. Yeah, remember the 47%. I was chatting this morning with a friend of mine who lives overseas, young guy, and we were talking about life experience and, how he had some regrets and, I don't know, some other things. And it occurred to me that there's this disconnect between young and old. The young people have like this tunnel vision, all the stuff on the outside they can't see. It's like all they see is what's ahead of them, and they don't see the dangers and the bad guys lurking and the bad shit lurking. So you can't see my hands out there because we have tunnel vision on this camera, but they're there, and they're scary, and they're gonna bite every once in a while. But young people don't see that, and they make big mistakes. Now, old people like me have experienced the trauma of tunnel vision and learned to have peripheral vision. There's a disconnect between rich and poor. The rich live in the ivory towers, and they know things, like what's the best stocks to buy, or what's a good $100 wine, or but us folks down here, on the other side, in the mobile homes, well, we know how to change a flat and change plugs in a van, and there's all these disconnects between people of different spectra, rich and poor, young and old, and then races and all this stuff, and that's a problem we need to recognize. But there's a worse disconnect these days that kind of fell into place this morning while I was working on reading my news like I usually do, and that disconnect is between who we should be and who we are. There is a disconnect between how we should act and how we do act. And I can only speak to this country. It seems to be global, but I can only speak to this country. And in this country, we've lost our way. Now, whose fault is that? It's my generation's fault, see, because we never gave up that that tunnel vision. My generation is still doing this. They're still not looking out there. They're not teaching their kids what they should. And they're not teaching their kids the right things for two reasons. One, a lot of my generation are just not living the way they should, caring about other people, and a lot more of them are actually telling their kids one thing and doing another. They will tell their kids to you be nice, be courteous, and they'll get in the car, and somebody will pull in front of them. You stupid son of a bitch! You see, there's that disconnect between, the hypocrisy, the thing that you're supposed to be doing, and you're not, and the thing you're telling your kids to do. That don't work either, and that makes a lot of kids bitter. We've lost respect and courtesy and selflessness, and I'm not talking about heroics, throwing yourself in front of a bus. I'm talking about simple selflessness, the kind of thing that you hold doors for somebody. You give people the benefit of the doubt. You give somebody a chance to explain. You do a task instead of saying, it's your turn. I was having a talk with my kids last night about that. And they have this problem with selfishness that instead of, they argue over the stupidest things, which chair to sit at a round table. Same kind of chair, round table, but it matters somehow. And it matters that I sit here and you sit there. No, I sat there last night. Oh boy. And You know, whose turn is it to get a shower first or to do the dishes? What fucking difference does it make? You know, I mean, you're going to do the same thing. What difference does it make? I don't know. It's like a competition thing, but it's selfishness, and I try so hard to teach my kids selflessness, and you know, I'd say they've come a long, long way, and they're not there yet, but they're young. But I teach them selflessness by, you know, showing it. You know, if somebody pulls in front of me, I slow down. You know, whatever. You know, treat people courteously. You know, there was I read a blog. Actually, the title of the blog is called "The Dark Narcotic Wonderland of Disenfranchised States of America." It's on a website called Zippity Doodah, and it was kind of an anonymous posting. There wasn't a name on there, so I don't remember. But I mean, it's an interesting article. I'll post a link on the notes. But there was a comment to that blog that I thought was, I mean, it was really, really good. It said, we are so used to people putting up more walls around us that when someone finally does come around to help them tear them down, we will throw rocks at him. If we throw too many rocks, he will go away. That was a comment by the Flying Cossack, whoever that is. But that's so true these days. People put these walls up. Why do we do that? Why do people put walls up? We're getting there. You see, I did that video on the 60s. Actually, my era really was the 70s, because I came of age in the 70s. But the 60s, you know, I look back on with more nostalgia, because I was younger, and I didn't understand a lot of the things going on, and I remember, you know, things, good things, mostly from the 60s and in my family, and well, there's some that was kind of shitty. That's another story. But, you know, I remember that era better for some cool stuff and a simpler life. But back then, it was simpler. I read a piece in the Activist Post called "The Fall of America and Rise in Spirit," and said some really cool things. I'll tell you what it said. I'll read it. No, that's boring. But whatever. It wasn't very long ago, the article says, when the worldview of the United States was one of a country that represented justice, democracy, freedom, and moral accountability, even if only in the minds of the naive. Well, that's true, but most of the country was naive, and that kind of naivety I like. He goes on to say, many well-meaning people now scorn American values. These are individuals who have been indoctrinated into accepting the perceived social norms. They've been so psychologically programmed into the corporate fascist society that they have never really considered deep moral questions of why they stand for what they do, or how their positions and beliefs measure up historically. That was by Bernie Suarez on Activist Post. And then the crux of the matter, I found it somewhere else. It was on a website called, what was the name of the website? World Economic Forum. It's called "We're Living in a Zero Trust Economy." And that's it. It's like those walls. We trust nobody. We put those walls up. We want nobody to come past those walls. This article says trust is one of the most, if not the most, important values to build, grow, and maintain in any type of relationship, whether professional or personal. Absolutely. That is the most important thing to me. It is one of those values that once broken can never fully be repaired, as so witnessed by so many hurt people these days. Unfortunately, for some time now, the world has been growing into a zero-trust economy, which has been growing and spreading around the world. A zero-trust economy. He says today, Not only may economies around the world be declining, but our values are also in recession. It is extremely rare to find anyone who does not put their own personal interests ahead of anything or anyone else. The value of trust now comes with questions. What's in it for me? And what do they get out of it? It is a system of checks and balances, but in my opinion, it doesn't balance. He goes on to say, what happened to what our parents and schools taught us, to thinking of others first, not doing unto others what we would not do unto ourselves, to putting our customers, employees, and shareholders first? What happened to the trust we used to have in our leaders to protect our interest? Our trust, he says, has been shattered by the incredible selfishness, self-centeredness, and double standards that exist today. Corruption, greed, lies, and lack of empathy have all led to the zero trust economy. And out of all values, this writer says, maybe with the exception of respect, which is highly correlated with trust, when trust breaks, so does everything else. It does. Trust breaks because of selfishness, because of this what do I get out of it mentality. And the part, what I thought was really, poignant, really important, was the questions they asked. What happened to our parents and schools? What happened to what our parents and schools taught us? To thinking of others first, to not doing unto others that we wouldn't done to ourselves, to putting customers, employees, shareholders first. What happened to the trust we used to have in our leaders to protect our interest? That is a good question. Now, my generation might say that because we were taught that. And I'll tell you what happened to those values. We blew them off. We just fucking blew them off, and we have not taught them to our kids. We blew all these values off. These days it's all about selfishness, not selflessness. But I teach my kids that we must be selfless. Why? Why should we be selfless? See, because all of those values that writer mentioned were all tied in with religious fervor. And you find that all over the world. Moral values translate into religious values. And that's the way I was taught. God says this is the way it should be done. And in my mind, for some reason, I didn't make the connection that a lot of people make now. In fact, most kids make now, and that's where the problem is. My parents told me what God expected me to do, and then quite often, they didn't do it. And not them so much, because my folks, they were pretty good. But they were good people, and I love them, and they tried. But most adults, in every era, no matter what their religious convictions are, they ignore them when it's convenient. And a kid sitting here being told that God told them to do this, and this is what you should do, and parents are saying, God told you what you should do, and then parents are going, boop. They're not doing it either. So, what's a kid to think? Well, what I thought was that if God told it to me, my parents are making mistakes. Those adults are making mistakes. I'm going to do what's right because of or in spite of the way some people act. Now, apparently, my brain didn't work like most people. In my generation, we saw religion fall apart. We saw hypocrisy and bigotry, and we began to see it for what it was because we lived outside of the shell. My generation had the TV set and the daily news, and back then you actually had real news. And we saw what was going on. We saw the riots. We saw Vietnam. We saw the body counts. And we saw this disconnect, and we lost faith in the foundation of what we were told. Now, most people's never given up on God. They think that I'm terrible you know. But the fact is, they've lost faith in that foundation and have created their own way above where it should be, with themselves sitting on top of it. Selfishness. What do I get out of it? Because all of those other moral values, they suddenly have no value. What good does it make if I take care of somebody else? What do I get out of it? You know, if I hold the door open for somebody else, I'm just delayed. What do I get out of it if I slow down and somebody pulls in front of me? I'm just delayed. You know, what do I get out of it if they get there in front of me, or if they get that and I don't get it? Because what the fuck does it matter? And people ask, you know, religious people who have the box, they don't live in it, but they have the box, and they ask me, how can I live without a box? How can you have morality and not believe there's some kind of, you know, great spirit, God, whatever, that set it up somewhere? Well, I'll tell you where mine comes from. Believe it or not, accept it or not, mine comes from the fact that we as human beings should be able to rise above what we once were. And we as human beings should care about not just ourselves, but our race and our species. You see, all other animals, they might fight and they might bicker among each other. You know, there's all kinds of rituals and instincts and shit. But the instinct primary in a race of animals or birds or bugs is to preserve their species, but not us. For some fucking reason, we've turned that upside down, and we're trying to kill ourselves off. We have it so in our head that we don't give a damn if our race survives as long as we do. You know, the guy sitting up in Washington with the big red button will snap that sucker in a minute and blow half the fucking country up so he can get his way. Or think he's getting his way. That doesn't make any sense to me. Our race should be going to the stars, not blowing each other away. And it's selfishness. Now, think about that. The article, Activist Post, concluded this way. It said, Bernie Suarez, the author of that article, he says, thankfully, history shows that these things do eventually change for the better. Humanity as a whole will eventually learn its lesson and reestablish the parameters for preventing this from happening again. History teaches that countries can be stolen and ideologies suppressed, but sound ideological and moral principles can also be rediscovered. Here's to the political, historical, and conscious cycle of life, the hope of a new tomorrow. I'm afraid that I can't agree with Mr. Suarez. I have forever loved the phrase, the saying by Santayana, the philosopher, political philosopher. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to relive it. We don't remember the past. We never do. As somebody with a history degree, it's pretty fucking obvious to me that nobody looks in the rearview mirror, which is really kind of stupid, because like I said the other day, 99% of what we are is what we were. And 5% of us, 0.5% of us is now, and 0.5% is our future. And what we should be doing is using our rearview mirrors and figuring our path forward. But instead, we've got this big wall of self in front of us, and all we can do is think about what we want and fuck the world. And I don't have a hell of a lot of hope that we won't continue down that path. I don't. I hope we do. What do you think? But, the big disconnect is between my generation and the young generation, the 20s and the teens. Kids, it's up to you. Because my generation has so fucked you over. My generation has so programmed your head. Blip, had an interruption. What I was saying was, my generation has so fucked you kids over, and I'm so sorry. Man, I tried. I was this squeaky ass little voice, and nobody ever fucking listened to me, and they still don't. you know, Mr. Insignificant here, but I tried, and I'm sorry. But it's up to you, and you need to stop listening to the bullshit and stop paying attention to my generation's idiotic pursuit of selfish goals, and use the time that you have when you're young not to fuck up. Because I tell my kids over and over and over, you know, if there's one lesson I want them to learn, is that once you fuck up, it's done. You can't put an egg back together. Now, my kid would say, yes, I could. I could sit down with tweezers. Not really. It wouldn't be the same egg. You may put the shell back together, but it's still going to have cracks. You can't seal that egg up the way it was first. Once you crack an egg, it's broken. So watch what the hell you're doing. Learn. Care about somebody else. Because if you don't, they're never going to fucking care about you. That's the other lesson I keep telling my kids. That's the one I was telling them last night. I said, if you don't care for somebody else first, they're not going to care for you. Don't wait for somebody to come tear that fucking wall down. Put it down yourself. Put it down yourself. And reach out to somebody else. You damn right you're going to get hurt. You damn right you're going to get your feelings hurt. You're damn right you're probably going to suffer every once in a while. But at the end of the day, when you're on your front porch and you're looking back, then you will know that you've done the right thing. And if you, the young generation, will do it, if you'll fucking do it, then you won't be able to put everything back together we fucked up. You won't. It ain't going to happen. But you can build on it. You can use those cracked eggs, shells, for fertilizer. So here's my great sage advice for today that popped in my head today, and you can quote me on this. It is this: lead with your head, steer with your heart, and keep your ass out of the ditch. Alright? Have a good day. Bye.